because I have a feeling this is one of those things I'm going to say, go back and watch the recording. All right, so I'm gonna tell you this story, and this is the story I tell uh, in the session, but it's really what turned me on to backup tuning, right? So it was like 96, 97, give or take. And there was a little product that just come on the market called Lightspeed. And, I noticed that they had these, it was GUI driven. And back then I was still doing stuff in the GUI. It was GUI driven, and I noticed it had things like called CPU count and buffer count and stuff like that. And I was like, I wonder what this is. And so it said, so I changed buffer count to like 5, right? And my backup was slower than it was before. And I said, okay, I'll change it to, maybe that's too many buffers. I'll change it to 2, right? And it was even worse. I said, okay, that was bad. So, okay, maybe I'll make it 10 instead. And it was a tiny bit faster, but it was still pretty damn slow, right? And so the mistake I made was I had no idea how many buffers my backup was using to begin with, right? It was using about 15 or so, right? So I was still constraining it. And so then I got on this big kick to learn how to use all of these features, all of these flags in the backup command. And again, if you don't have a tuned backup, you don't have a tuned restore, right? If you don't tune your backup, you can't tune your restore, period. You cannot take a single file backup and then restore a multi-file backup, right? You can't split it off into 10 files now that you've decided that your 4 terabyte database is going to take too long to restore. So you have to plan ahead. You absolutely have to. And that not only includes striping and all of these things as well, but it includes what's one way that we plan for speeding up our restores, guys?
Well,
Anybody?
turning it on by
Do
the
what?
user to the policy. IFI instant file initialization
Okay,
for SQL Server.
good. That's one way. What's another one?
I mean, better back
How
restores, right?
about managing the size of our log,
Yeah.
Yeah, log would be the next
Right,
step.
yes.
right?
Yes, that's
Because IFI is not, log files. There's no way to IFI. It's only for data files.
Exactly.
Yeah. Smaller the log file, better the restore.
So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to go over the beginnings of this, right? So did you guys know that backups have an execution plan? And unfortunately, it's not the kind of execution plan that we're used to. This one is crappy, at least. But at least we have it. And so I've been on Microsoft for a long time now to create an actual graphical execution plan for backups, which would be just beautiful, right? But, so far no good. Okay, so what are we going to do today? We're going to look at a restore, and I'm going to show you the basics of how to start finding out this information, and we're going to learn some trace flags. And this is all information that I expect you guys to remember. So I expect you to, I suspect that you'll be studying it and practicing on your own, because it does take practice, right? It's not the kind of thing that you can just look at, watch me do, and then say, okay, now I know how to do it. Because tuning is just as much art as it is science, right? You get a feel for it over time. So, okay, I'm going to restore this database. I took a backup the other day, and I've got a file list here. So I've got my restore statement right here. Here, let me give it a little bit of space so you can see that. There we go. So now, I've got two settings here, trace on and trace off for 1806. 1806, when it's on, disables IFI for testing purposes, right? So again, it's only for this session, right? Because I didn't put like a -1 in there that makes it global. So 1806 disables IFI. So if I come here and I enable IFI, or I enable the disabling of IFI, right? And here I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to set two more trace flags, 3604 and 3004. Does anybody know what 3604 does? Okay, 3604 and 3605 are important because they direct the output of the DBCC, right? They direct the output of the other trace flag. So 3604 directs the output here to the console. 3605 directs it to the log. So let's take a look at this. As a matter of fact, just to speed it up a little bit, I'm going to enable IFI by turning off the disabling trace flag. Boy, that language gets a little thick, doesn't it? And so I'm going to start here. There we go. And 3004 is where you get your backup execution plan, essentially, right? So let's go ahead and run our restore. Let me drop this guy. I had a drop statement in here somewhere. There it is. So I'm going to drop this guy and let's run our restore. It shouldn't take too long. Okay, you see, we're getting our execution plan in here, right? It's telling us what it's doing. Planning is complete. Beginning offline restore. Attached is ID 27. Preparing containers, so on and so on. Transferring data. And now we're getting our percentage of actually moving the data. Actually restoring the files. And it's going to take just a few more seconds because it's not too bad. So this is our execution plan. The problem with this is viewing this as an execution plan. What is the big problem with this? Anybody know? What do you kind of need in an execution plan?
What step of the execution is taking longer time?
Yeah,
Yeah, the time the operator takes.
yeah, you need some timings, right? Okay, so this is done. And this is on an SSD, so we're getting really good throughput here. So the whole process took 52 seconds. Okay, not too bad. But remember, that's with IFI turned on, right? So the problem here is we don't have any timings whatsoever. And this is where that redirect comes in. So now, instead of 3604, I'm going to put in 3605. There we go. So let's turn that on. And let's run the exact same one. Just as a matter of fact, I kind of need to. I'm going to turn off 3604. Oops. And then 3604. There we go. So let's turn both of these guys off. There we go. And turn both of these guys on just to make sure. Good. Now let's drop our database. And before we do that, I'm going to cycle the error log to make this easier to read. There we go. And now let's run our restore again. We'll look at the messages. It's putting it out to the thing anyway. I must not have run that right. So trace off 3604. It should have. Anyway, so real quick, what does 1806 do?
Secure
Disables
IFA.
IFI.
Disables IFI.
Right. It disables it, right? Okay.
Yeah.
What does 3605 do?
It writes output into execution plan into the message tab.
No.
And error log.
Into the log.
Into the log, yes.
3604 goes to the
yes.
console, right?
The console, yes.
And what does 3004 do?
What did I just said before?
Oh, okay.
That's just the console.
Right. Well, no,
It
it's
shows
what
the
gives you,
plan.
yeah, it shows you the plan, right? So now I don't have the log open. I thought I might, but I don't. So let me go with current. Let me refresh this. And now you see even some more information, really. But now you can see restoring container, fix up begins, fix up is complete. Now you can see all of these steps with the timings. And that's what makes this a really crappy plan, right? Is that now you have to go in here and you have to find the beginning and ends of all of these. And you have to do the diff yourself in order to find out if something weird is taking a particularly long time, right? So one way that I like to handle this, because I'm usually only looking for one thing in here, I'm looking for zeroing, right? So I'll come in here and I'll say where message text equals 0, I'll apply the filter, and now I can see my zeroing steps. This is why I like to cycle the log before I do this. But you can see that I'm zeroing, that zeroing begins here and that zeroing completed here. So it took, 7.5 seconds, right? And this is with IFI turned on, right? So this is how you look to see, how much you can look to see here. Like if you've got a database that you typically run a really large log for, and you want to do a test restore to see how long it's going to take, then you can run that, and then you can come in here and you can look and see how long it took to do the zeroing out of the log file, and then you can see how much time you can save by reducing the size of the log file by tens of gigs, right? And you can get a percent in here too. So this is 2019, and so it gives you the milliseconds here when it's done. It usually, and previous versions, it didn't do that. I don't know if it started in 2019. It could have started in 16 for all I know, but it didn't used to do that. So you'd have to like find the begin and find the end where it says it's complete, and then come in here and do a diff with the times and get it in seconds. So here's where you would get the diff and the times. And this is just converting milliseconds to seconds. So what you do is you take the number of seconds that it took to zero the log file times 100 and divide that by the total restore time. And that'll give you the percentage that the log file was, that zeroing the log file took. So in the operation I ran last night, it took 10% of the restore process. Okay, but this log is only 10 gigs. If you have a 90 gig log file, 150 gig log file, right? Like so many people like to keep these large logs, you're going to get into, 30, 45% of your restore time is going to be doing nothing but zeroing the logs. So it's really important to know what the effect of the size of your log is, and find a medium in there, find a control medium in there, right? You don't want it to be 1 gig all the time and constantly growing, because you're gonna incur those zeros throughout the day, right? but you also don't want it so damn big that it adds an extra 3 hours to your restore time. So it's a really big deal to know the percentage of your log restores, of your log zeros. Now let's take a look at this. We're going to do this again. I'm going to drop this. I'm going to cycle the error log again. And now I'm going to turn 1806 on. And by turning 1806 on, what am I doing?
Disabling
Disabling the IFI.
IFI.
Yes.
0 Newton, yes.
Okay, so now let's run this restore. And I want to show you something. See how long it's sitting here without giving me any results? It's just sitting there and sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. What do you think it's doing?
It's zeroing out the data file for the
Zeroing out.
database.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zeroing.
So this is why IFI is so important for restores. It's actually really important for just regular database operations, right? Because every time the data file grows, you have to zero out. Good God, are you kidding? Right? And now we're
Sean,
finally starting.
I have a quick question. By turning this flag, does the account under which SQL Server service running to be already added to the local policy, or it can the flag itself can do it for you, or it's a mandatory to add it first the account?
Ask that again.
In order to take IFI on, you need to add account under which SQL Server service running to local. I don't remember this. There's a policy group on the Windows.
Right.
So by turning this flag on and off, would it do it for you, or you have to first add the account to the policy to the group?
No,
I'm sorry.
no, it would have had to have already been turned on at the Windows level by adding that account to the security group. And this flag just tells SQL basically to ignore that, right?
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're done. And now we can come back in here in the logs and let's refresh that. And now look, we get zeroing the MDF, and look how long that took, right? So now we can see both of them. And this is how you can tell whether or not IFI is turned on for a system, right? Is if you see log zeros for the data files. Now, you may not have files that grow very often, so you may not be able to see it, right? If you just go into a vague system and look at it. So what I tend to do is I would just create a dummy database and then come into the log and see if the data files were zeroed out when it was created. Then I drop the database. So, that's a good way to do that. So now let's talk about turning on IFI. Since IFI is so incredibly important, let's look at turning it on. So I'm gonna come in here. Oh, well, it came up in the other window. I'm gonna look at local security policy, and it came up on the other side. There we go. And now I'm gonna look at local policies, user rights assignment, and it's all the way down here under perform volume maintenance tasks. That's the one you want. So the service account for SQL has to have access to this setting. And then IFI is enabled, or I'll say SQL has been given access to IFI, right? Now, there's a caveat here. If you turn this on, if I come in here and add this service account to this group, SQL only checks for this permission on startup. So once you do this, you have to burp the service. There's no way around it. Everybody understand that? Cool.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yeah.
and every Windows box has this local security policy, right? You get to it by going search and then secpol, and then you can just hit enter and it comes up on the other screen. There it is, right? And again, I'll show you one more time. Local policies, user rights assignment, and perform volume maintenance tasks. Where the hell is it? There it is. Cool. All right, so now we're back in our log.
So if the SQL is running on local account, then by default it is enabled, right?
Yeah, because administrators automatically have access. Unless they don't. So it's always best to check, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Again with this formula, right? So one mistake that a lot of people make is when they first start this is they forget basic algebra. And this is as bad as the math gets, really. But there is some math involved, right? So this is basic algebra. Everything has to be in the same metric, right? You have to use the same unit of measure for everything. That's why when this guy gives it to me in milliseconds, I convert it to seconds. Because this one is given to me in seconds, right? This one's slightly different. It says 56, but it's okay. I'm using data from last night's run. So you take this number here in seconds with this number here in seconds. So I take the 0 seconds times 100. So this will be 600 divided by the total seconds of the entire operation, and that gives me the percentage of the entire operation that this guy is.
Yeah, a small difference. It just gave us the restore time, but it didn't give us the zeroing out. It was actually 76 seconds.
What was 76 seconds?
76 or 86. Yeah, the whole restore took 1 minute 26 seconds. But the particular restoration part, which it gave in the message, is 56 or 58 seconds. It was different.
Ah, I see. Yeah. Yeah, I usually go by the bottom number. I usually go by the number reported in messages. Oh, well, I've messed it up now. But yeah, this is why IFI is important, right? It also gives you a little bit more accurate time. So let's see, what else did I want to cover today? Because I'm trying to keep these a little bit shorter than my usual hour-long thing, because like I said, we are going to slow this down a little bit. So right, so here's what I want y'all to do. I want y'all to practice this using these trace flags and calculating this this time. And if it doesn't give it to you in milliseconds in the log, because I know we've got a lot of like 2012 in this environment, then just do the date diffs and it'll give you the seconds. So practice looking at this information, and one thing you'll see is you also get this for backups, right? If I were to run this backup again, there we go. So I'm going to run this backup over here. And it should be giving it to me for backups. Did I turn off 3604? I don't remember. I don't think so.
It was on.
Let me see what we're getting in the log. Oh, I'm not getting any, I didn't print the messages to the thing. Okay, that's why I'm not getting anything at all in there. So let me unfilter this. There we go. And I'll refresh that. And now you can see that I get also the parts of the backup that are the steps for the backup as well, right? And this is interesting here. This is, you always like to verify things yourself. And you notice here it says differential bitmaps are cleared. What does that mean? Anybody? It's okay.
Because we are taking full backup, so it's resetting the differential bitmaps.
Right, which means practically, what does that mean? What does that mean to us?
Well, it means it's a full backup. I mean, because it clears differentials bitmaps every time a full backup runs. So
Right, so practically, what does that mean to us?
we're running full backup. It clears it resets the chain the way to put it.
LSA.
Right, so
Yeah, the media.
so
Sorry, go
you're
ahead.
right, you're just finding different ways to say the same thing. So
Okay.
practically, it means that we've just set a new differential base,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
this now, any diffs that we take, this is the backup that has to be restored first, right? This is the new diff base.
Yeah.
And so if you do something like this, right? Again, you like to see things for yourself, right? If we do a copy only now, and we know this will take a few seconds, so, who wants to sing around to row your boat? We also know it's not going to spit anything out till it's done, because I didn't put stats in there again. Doopy 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 doo. And you notice that I've got what in my backups? Always, always, always.
Initiate and format.
Right. What's the difference between the two?
Initiate every time. Well, one is responsible for files, and the other one is actually. Oh, shoot. I remember, but.
Anybody else?
Init formats the header and formats the media set information.
Anybody else?
Pretty much same. Init
Init
resets the.
Init overwrites the data, and format overwrites the header.
Yeah, headers for
Yeah.
files and yeah.
Okay, so we've got this guy here, and you notice nowhere do we reset the differential bitmap,
No.
right?
Because it's copy only, yeah.
Because we did copy only. So you can see, and even diff section finished, right? So you can see here that copy only definitely does not give us a new diff base. So again, this is just a good way to come in here and say, what types of things is the backup doing, right? So this is, you've seen now a restore execution plan and a backup execution plan. This doesn't do much for you, but it shows you a couple things, like diff bitmaps and whatnot, right? But other than that, right? So I'm going to call that the end of this lesson. Tomorrow, when we start up again, I'm going to call on somebody to run. Probably all three of you at one point are going to run through one of these sections, and I'm going to have you physically do some of this stuff. So if I were you, I would study and practice. Any questions?
No, so far so good.
Excellent. All right, so
Yeah.
I'm going to drop my restore database, and tomorrow we'll go another step further, and then we'll just keep going until we're done. I don't know how long this is going to take. I'm going to stop
Thank
the
you, Sean.
recording now.